to this session, and as part of our series on the role of mindfulness, embodiment, transformation, and systems leadership. So we are today with Chun from the Compassion Institute. I'm Thomas Legrand, consultant working on the Conscious Sustainability Initiative. So I'm happy to introduce this session and having you all here with Jane for the next almost 2 hours. So Jane will take us on a journey to explore and experiment what is it like showing up and resting in compassion in times of crisis. So we are exploring through this series of webinars how relevant are different consciousness practices to support our work and our agenda. We have had Gelong Tupton on the role of mindfulness back, I think, in July. Then we had Stacey Haynes from the Strozzi Institute talking about embodiment and what does that mean for transforming self, teams, communities, and systems. We had also Jane Weber and Alain Leong on systems leadership from the Leadership Coefficient. So I'm Thomas Legrand. I work on the Conscious Sustainability Initiative that we are just starting to design. It's based, I think, on the recognition that really for the transformation that we need in terms of sustainability, we need to address the problems at their root cause level, and we need to start thinking of how we can transform mindset, how we can work on personal transformation, which is key to build the inner foundations for sustainability and fuel the effectiveness of our technical work. As you know, there's a kind of momentum on these questions within UNDP. We also had a series of webinars with Otto Scharmer. There's a growing recognition, thanks also to the COVID-19 crisis, to open up these deeper conversations. So I'm glad we are opening this space. So we are with this Conscious Sustainability Initiative is one of the way, that we can bring these consciousness practices into our work. We are planning to co-create this initiative with partners, starting in the agricultural commodity space. At the moment, we are reaching out to potential partners, and we have very positive responses, including from the Compassion Institute and Jane, who have mentioned their interest to become a founding partner of this initiative. So through this initiative, we want to build a global community around conscious sustainability and establish this as a field of practice. What does that mean? What are the concrete pathways and approach to integrate that into the way we work, but also into a very work agenda? What kind of projects and prototypes that we can develop to bring these approaches into our work, working with governments, but also probably companies, even local communities, farmers, how we can bring that into our projects. What does that mean also in terms of policies? Yeah, so we are looking to raise funds for launching this Conscious Sustainability Initiative last year, starting with a co-creation process with multiple partners and starting testing approaches for prototypes with the support of a community of practitioners that are interested to contribute and to share the the lesson they have learned along the way. I myself live next to a mindfulness practice center here in the southwest of France. It's a famous center. It's called Plum Village, from Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. So I'm fully convinced of the importance of personal and cultural change for facilitating this great transformation we really need at the collective level. I've been looking for ways myself to connect my own journey of transformation with my work on sustainability for the last 20 years, I guess, with like lots of you here today. I've worked recently on a book which is called The Politics of Being, Spiritual Wisdom for a New Development Paradigm, where I try to articulate the rationale for making being instead of having or main collective goal, conceptual framework to accommodate all the relevant perspectives, claim on this agenda, and be able to really develop a structured approach, intellectual approach to this, and a concrete political agenda of what does this mean for all different development sectors. So I'm really glad to be here today with you and here connect together and hear Jane Chun from the Compassion Institute to lead this session. So over to you, Jane. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Thomas. Hello, welcome everyone. It's really lovely to be here. If you're able to turn on your cameras, I'm going to invite you to do that so that we can feel like we're here together in a room and present for each other. Thank you. And if you're not, that's okay too. Yeah, so as Thomas mentioned, I am a program director at the Compassion Institute. We are a nonprofit, and we come out of the Stanford University Neurosciences Institute. And our mission is compassion advocacy and compassion education. And our work is based on kind of ancient practices and really grounded in research, science, and evidence from the fields of neuroscience, contemplative science, which is a part of neuroscience, psychology, and the social sciences. So personally, I came to this work that I'm doing now after about 9 years of serving in the UN, UNDP, UNICEF, IOM, and other international nonprofits. And I've worked in areas including peace building, climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, displacement, forced migration, sustainable livelihoods. And in my PhD research, kind of overlapping on top of some of these areas, I've also brought in the decision sciences, so how people make decisions in contexts where they're both vulnerable and resilient. And so at CI, we work with people and organizations that serve others. So in sectors such as social change, and social change, I would include the work that you do, development, humanitarian work. Also in healthcare and public health, in education with educators, and with law enforcement officers as well. We've also do work in prisons and other spaces. And we do this work because we believe that working with the mind, as many, if not all of you know, has the potential to profoundly magnify the impact of what we do, so what you all do, and how we do it, right? So for example, hopefully causing less harm through unintended consequences, and doing this work with more resilience, right? And more alignment with our values day to day. So I may not need to do this because you've all shown up voluntarily for this session, but I'm going to just briefly make the case for, why would you do mind training, this kind of mind training, meditation, other methods to train our mind states of being, in this kind of work that you do. So burnout. I'm going to start with burnout. So evidence suggests that one of the primary drivers of burnout and attrition, leaving the profession in development and humanitarian space, is not that the work itself is difficult, that we're around suffering, working in different, challenging contexts, but the primary driver appears to be more organizational. So organizational politics, toxicity at work, professional relationships. And the more values-based you are, the more driven by personal values you are, the more prone to burnout, it seems, that we are. Because of this misalignment of, why you entered this profession in the first place, why you're, doing this service-oriented work, and the experience day to day at work, that misalignment. So it's just that much more difficult to kind of live with every day, right? So culture matters. How people treat each other at work matters. And all of this impacts the work itself, of course, right? Whether or not we can show up as our best selves, collaborate meaningfully and well, how motivated we are, how burned out we are, right? I personally have been burned out, I think about 2 times when I was serving, in the UN. So that's one reason we might do this work. Another reason is that, as we do this work of systems change, it's really easy to think of the system as being out there, right? When in fact, we are part of the system, right? And so how we show up matters. How we show up for difficult meetings with government officials, how we perceive the communities that we work with. And I've definitely had experiences of, seeing colleagues kind of have breakdowns or have moments of not treating, communities as, they probably would like to, when they're not so stressed out, when they're able to manage their stress and emotions. And so how we show up has ripple effects in the system that we're a part of. And there's a slogan from the climate activist circles that I really love, which is that, we're not protecting nature. We are nature protecting itself, right? We're part of the system. So our state of mind shapes what we actually end up doing, the decisions we make, who we end up including, not including in planning, implementation, evaluation, the trust that's built in relationships or not built. And all this impacts a lot of things, sustainability of our programs, what that program looks like, policy advocacy, meetings, convenings. And the last point that I just want to briefly touch on is from a social justice point of view, I also believe it's a matter of ethics. So, no matter what situation we're in, we all know there are power dynamics in the room. And so if I'm designing or implementing interventions or influencing policies that affect the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in the world, then I believe I have an ethical obligation to do what I can to become more aware of my biases and perceptions, because that will show up in each interaction, in each moment. And to, cultivate the skills to be able to regulate my emotions so I can show up as my best self for this really important work, right? So I can make the best decisions in service of the communities and the causes that I'm working for. So those are just some of the reasons, and there are many more, but there's some of the reasons I wanted to just bring into the room for why we might do this kind of inner work. So I'll share a slide now that I'm sure many of you are aware of. It's of the Iceberg Model. And so as many of you know, the Iceberg Model is a systems thinking tool designed for us to uncover kind of the layers underlying a particular event, contributing to an event. Right? So if you want to change a system, the deeper you go down the iceberg, the more powerful the leverage point. So the more impact you can have on the system as a whole to create change in the system. So for example, if very kind of mundane example of the event might be doing, let's say your team is planning for your next 5-year strategic plan, right? So what are the patterns of behavior, the trends that occur at these types of planning meetings? You might find that there are certain people who talk a lot and others who don't, right? Or there's a pattern of certain people are interrupted, not heard. There might be a pattern of fitting in meetings like this at the very last minute, right? I've certainly had these experiences. And beneath that, then, what are the structures in place, that the container for these patterns and trends? So, one structure might be that the 5-year plan in a certain format is required, right? So every kind of team program has to do this every 5 years. There's also the UN professional grade structure, right? There's a kind of hierarchy. Consultants tend to have more job insecurity. I've been in that position quite a lot. And so maybe some people don't feel as safe speaking up, rocking the boat, suggesting other ideas, different ways of doing things. And then at the deepest level, then, are the mental models. These are our beliefs, our worldviews, the kind of beliefs that shape a culture, assumptions, values. And so, for example, one might be like the belief that we just don't have time, this kind of culture of urgency. And sometimes there, in fact, is a cause for urgency, but not all the time, right? But the kind of the speediness of the urgency of everything can become a mental model, right? Or the idea that certain people's views are more valuable than other people's views. And sometimes, if someone is a specialist in something, like their view clearly is valuable. But, other times that's not always the case, but we have this kind of perception that, this person is worth listening to. This person is maybe has less to contribute. And so, for example, like, why are stakeholders not involved in 5-year strategic plans, at least the ones that I've done? Right? So that's coming from a certain mental model. I'm not making a commentary on whether it's right or wrong, but just, surfacing some assumptions we have. So what does this have to do with training the mind? Right? It's probably becoming clear. Working with the mind and the neurophysiology, by working with the mind, we're changing our neurophysiology. We're intervening at the deepest level of the system, the most powerful leverage point, by shifting our mindsets, right? And so we're taking ownership over our minds and nervous systems so that we can kind of question the way we do things. We can show up in the way that we would like, more in line with our values, collaborate with intention, rather than just operating on autopilot, right? And kind of acting out our social conditioning, social norms, the way things have always been done, just acting out the power dynamics, for example. Right? So that's just, a way to illustrate the power of working with the mind and why that might be relevant for the work that you all do. Okay, so what we're doing, as you know by now, is we're training the mind. We're training our attention. Okay? And moment to moment, this moment to this moment to this moment, whether or not we're conscious of it, we're training our attention all the time. Like we're training in physical fitness, right? So right now we're not like at the gym working out, but whether you're working out, you're using the stairs instead of taking the elevator, or we're sitting kind of all day, all of these actions has an effect on our bodies, right? On our physical health, right? What we eat. And although it's not visible in the same way, we're training the attention and nervous system in each moment, reinforcing old or new neurophysiological pathways and patterns and habits. Right? So how do we know that we can train the mind and cultivate qualities like compassion, a settled mind, patience, like this? And Thupten talked about this quite a bit, but the way that we know that, one of the ways that we can know that is neuroplasticity, which is the revolutionary finding from the past 2 decades from the field of neuroscience. I'm going to share with you a video as I'm talking so you can kind of get a sense of our brains constantly at work. So this is a 3D depiction of the brain. And it was developed out of 2 labs at University of California, San Francisco, and San Diego. Okay. So neuroplasticity, right, as you know, refers to the plasticity of our brains, right? The malleability of our brains. We used to believe that only happened in children, but now we know that this plasticity happens also for adults well into old age, right? So it's possible to train the mind at any age. So our brains are constantly changing depending on the stimulation we're exposed to, the thoughts we have over and over, how we use our brains. So if I have a habitual tendency to be self-critical and hard on myself, for example, those neural pathways are the ones that will get stronger and thicker. Physically, they get stronger and thicker. And if I stop thinking those self-critical thoughts, those neural pathways will start to actually get weaker and weaker and almost disappear entirely. Right? So in that way, I cultivate mental habits. Oops, okay, we don't want to go to the next video. Okay. So neurons that fire together, wire together. You were seeing neurons and neural pathways firing there. So, there have been just countless studies of the effects of meditation on the brain. And it's I mean, physically we can see the difference. And so it's possible to train the mind, even though it feels less tangible, so that the quality is like, being present, being able to stay centered, even when there's a lot of activity happening around us. Kindness, compassion, it's possible. The science is there and shows us that it's possible. So that we can choose our response in each moment rather than kind of being, enslaved to our mental habits and social conditioning. And we can choose our states of being like compassion so that it becomes our orientation day to day in each interaction, right? Even when things are challenging, which is when we tend to go immediately into autopilot, right? Go to those strong neural pathways because that's what's easiest for us. The other inner resource that we work with is the autonomic nervous system. And I'll share my slide again here. So this is an old etching of the vagus nerve, which means the wandering nerve, which is appropriate because it's our longest cranial nerve in the body. Extends from the brainstem all the way down to parts of the colon. And so through training, we can also become aware of where we are, how our nervous system is doing, and also regulate it. So in our nervous system, as many of you are aware, we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is this pink box here, the fight or flight, right? So that's our threat response, right? So that's what was evolutionarily, that's what activated so that when there's a saber-toothed tiger running after us, we can, our body can mobilize our resources away from kind of the thinking brain and digesting food to our big muscle groups, to the heart so it can beat faster and we can run away, right? It's not really useful to stand there and be, let's be mindful and contemplate, should I run, should I not? No, that part shuts down and we just kind of, we're immediately in threat survival mode. And the parasympathetic nervous system, there are two branches. There's the dorsal system, which is the oldest system that's kind of shut down, freeze. Okay, and that's also a survival response. Like if a lizard feels threatened, it'll just play dead. Okay. And the other branch of the parasympathetic nervous system, which we call the resilience zone, is the ventral vagal branch. And that's, like layman's terms, rest and digest system, right? That's when the body feels safe enough to rest. That's when we can show up as our best selves, when we're able to connect to others, listen and actually hear others. And so by working with the mind, we're also able to recognize when we're in kind of sympathetic surge or dorsal shutdown and come back into resilience. And we sometimes call the resilience zone the relational zone because that's when you can really kind of be present for others. If I'm feeling like I'm under threat, physiologically, it's really, really difficult to be present in a way that I can actually hear other people and see other people. Right? Just our body is just designed this way, and there's nothing wrong with sympathetic or dorsal. It's, you know, it's all designed to protect us. It's our body's way of protecting us. But usually, you know, that email that pops up is not life-threatening, right? So we don't need the sympathetic surge. It doesn't serve us, right? So we can recognize when, okay, so here I am. Okay, here's anger coming up. Here's that narrative. That person is like, you know, coming at me again. Okay, recognize that, and then come back into kind of being centered and more settled. And I'll stop share. Okay, let me find you guys. All right. So I thought we could at this point then just try out a practice. And for those of you who've joined Thupten's sessions, you know, this will feel very familiar, and I'm sure many of you already have a meditation practice. So we're going to do kind of a mindful awareness practice, just to be present with an anchor. So, you know, what we're doing is we're training the mind to just stay with an object, an anchor. And it's common to use the anchor of the breath because it's always there, right? As long as we're alive, we're breathing. So we can use that. Or the sensation of the body. So that might be right in this moment, because I imagine most of us aren't moving around, this feeling of like sitting in this chair and feeling, you know, the body being supported by the chair. If you have your own mindfulness practice and use other anchors, please feel free to do that. Just for this practice, I'm going to invite us to use either one of these anchors. And then if you have a pen and paper nearby or something to write with, as we come out of the practice, I'm going to invite us to just journal on a few prompts. Just going back to some of the things I've talked about, like the Iceberg Model and kind of the mental models that might be present for you. Okay, great. So let's start the practice. It'll be about 10, 12 minutes. Okay, so a brief sit. All right, so I invite you just to find a comfortable posture just for the next 10 or 12 minutes or so. Just sitting in a way that where your body feels supported. And just starting to draw the attention inward, right? We spend most of our day directing our attention outward. Just starting to turn that lens inward. And you might close the eyes if that feels comfortable. Or if you prefer, just dropping the gaze softly so you're not distracted by the screen in front of you. I invite you to bring some awareness to the back of your body. Feeling the strength of your back. Be strong and flexible like a 1,000-year-old oak tree. And there's some flexibility there for the tree to weather storms. And this strong back allows the front of your body to be soft and open to the world. Strong back, soft front. I invite you to start with 3 deep cleansing breaths. So on the inhale, taking the biggest inhale you've taken all day, and then exhaling through the mouth. Again, inhale, expanding that rib cage outward like an accordion. And a long sigh out. Just letting go. One more at your own pace. Deep inhale. And a long exhale. And just allowing the breath to settle into its natural rhythm. Now briefly checking in with your inner weather. This is part of self-awareness. How are you feeling in this moment? How is your body feeling? What feeling tones are present? Nothing to do, just noticing, just checking in. Now, starting to turn the awareness back to the body. Just noticing the sensation of your body being supported by the chair and the earth below. You might feel that support maybe in the seat, in the weight of your body, maybe at your feet. It's making contact with the ground. Simply noticing. You're welcome to stay here as your anchor, or to move the attention now to the breath. Just noticing the in-breath, the out-breath. Just feeling yourself being breathed. Allowing yourself just to do nothing. Just resting with the in and out breath, or your body just sitting here. If the mind wanders, which it will, just noticing where it's gone and gently guiding it back to the breath, the body, practicing that muscle of awareness. The movement of the mind, the chatter, is like the waves on the surface of the ocean, just sinking below the surface to the quieter depths of the mind and heart. Just resting there, the breath or body. Listening with kind attention to each inhale, exhale. Allowing the mind to settle. Now, as we come to the end of this brief practice, maybe just starting to wiggle the fingers and toes, moving the body if you'd like, and just taking all the time you need to slowly open the eyes, bringing your awareness back to the room where you're sitting and the screen in front of you. Just noticing how you feel. Now, if you can, just grabbing that pen, paper, something to write with. I'm going to offer a couple prompts. So, bringing to mind now that a challenge that you have at work, currently or in the past, just recalling that challenge. Doesn't have to be anything big. And in that interaction or situation, what beliefs are present for you? What assumptions, values are present for you? This is not about making the case for your side of the story or why you think things should be the way they are. It's right or wrong, but just what values are driving your stance, what assumptions, what beliefs are present for you. You can just write stream of consciousness, right? There's no right or wrong answer. Have about a minute. Beliefs about yourself, about other person or people, how things should be. Okay, it's starting to wrap up that prompt. What beliefs might you let go of? What's holding you back or keeping you stuck or the situation stuck? What beliefs, assumptions might not be serving the situation? I have about a minute. Again, this is not about being right or wrong or good or bad. It's just peeking under the lid, just seeing what's there. What can you let go of? Whatever's coming up for you is the right thing just to write down. Wrapping that up. The next prompt, last prompt. What beliefs, perspectives can you allow or make space for that might serve the situation? Also, values. What can you allow or make space for? And if you feel you can't make space for anything else, just noticing that, that's also perfectly fine. Okay, starting to wrap up. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms now of about 4 people each. And I invite you just to share what came up for you, either as you were listening to me speaking earlier here during the practice or in this journaling exercise, what did you notice? What came up for you? You'll have about 8 minutes, so about two minutes each to share. And then we'll come back and have a large group discussion. So Alexandra, I'll pass it over to you. Hey, welcome back. So I'd love to hear if anyone would like to share what came up for you. I'm going to invite you to share from your own experience and not share someone else's experience. Yeah, and anything you'd like. So in the last almost hour we have left, I'd like to just kind of enter the train of compassion. And also make the distinction between empathy and compassion. That's used interchangeably a lot. But in terms of kind of compassion science and the way that we think of it in contemplative practice, there is a distinction. And in our brain and body, there's a distinction. Okay, so you know, in the work that you do, you know, you're kind of surrounded by suffering, pain, injustice. There's a lot of stress at work, among colleagues, right? Not all the time, but you know, that's kind of part of the nature of this work, which makes it all the more important to distinguish between empathy and compassion. And I will share a slide here. Okay. So compassion versus empathy is the feeling that arises in witnessing another suffering. And after kind of being aware that they're suffering, then there's this sense of motivation to help, to be of support. Whereas empathy is the vicarious experience of the other person's emotions, of that suffering, right? And when we feel empathy, so when we face someone else's suffering, it's very natural for us to immediately feel empathy, right? And there's different types of empathy. It can be cognitive, so just a perspective taking, you know, oh, that must be hard, right? Standing in their shoes. It could be feeling the emotions, kind of like an emotion contagion, right? And we know like anger is very contagious, or, you know, if you're with someone who's feeling sad, you might feel their sadness. Right? Empathy can also be visceral in the body. So, like if I'm with Thomas and I see him, you know, walking across the room and he accidentally stubs his toe, I might also kind of wince because I feel that in my body as if I stub my toe. And so empathy, when we feel what the other person is feeling emotionally or vicariously in the body, it activates the pain centers of our brain, right? There are mirror neurons in our brain. And so it's like I'm feeling the shadow of what the other person's feeling. And some of us are are more empathetic, so we kind of like really take on what the other person is feeling, or we take on that feeling of pain. Right? And empathy is important because it makes us human. It motivates us to care, right? It's at the core of social justice, wanting to serve, to make things better. It motivates us to act. But staying in empathy for too long can lead to empathic distress. So this lower pathway here, right? And so we go into overwhelm, and it takes a toll, right? And ironically, um, empathic distress it tends to make us more self-oriented. We're no longer focused on the other person. We're kind of busy feeling the distress ourselves. And we actually become more likely to disengage and turn away, shut down, get burned out, right? Because just like physiologically in the body, it's too much. Right? So empathic distress is associated with burnout and poor health outcomes. And you might think of times when you felt empathic distress. Right? This is very, very natural. It happens automatically in the nervous system. There's nothing that we're doing wrong. And by practicing awareness and kind of these skills of emotional intelligence and compassion, we can kind of notice what we're experiencing internally and steer instead to the compassion pathway, which is this upper pathway here. And compassion in the brain is very different from empathy, right? It's like completely different parts of the brain. Compassion activates the reward centers of the brain, so it feels rewarding. Motor function, so action, you're motivated to act, to help. We actually lean toward, move toward. We want to kind of touch, make contact, if that's in our culture. And the affiliation areas of the brain are active. So we feel a sense of connectedness, belonging, right? Being together. So compassion, even if we're around a lot of suffering, actually feels good. There's a sense of kind of like a warm glow sometimes is how it's described. Right? Sometimes you might have heard the term helper's high. And I'm sure you've all felt this, like after hard days of work, of, you know, kind of feeling like you've done meaningful work, this kind of, even though it was really hard, it feels good, right? And even as you were doing the work, it wasn't depleting, like as in overwhelm and you're feeling kind of frazzled or shut down, but it feels good. And that's called compassion satisfaction. And so in this place, thinking back to the ventral vagal zone, right? We're in the state of regulation. Right? We can access the prefrontal cortex of our brain, the front part of our brain, the higher cognitive functioning. Right? We're aware of what's happening. We're attuned to what's really needed, more or less, rather than reacting from a place of kind of fixing, needing to fix, distress, or, coming from a place of like habitual tendencies, the autopilot. Okay, so stop share. Okay, so I'm going to invite us now to try out a compassion practice. And before I do that, I'll just talk briefly about kind of just about the practice, right? The practice of cultivating compassion. So when we cultivate compassion for others, particularly beyond our immediate circle of concern, right? Beyond the circle of people we kind of tend to care about, we do that from the ground of common humanity, what we call common humanity. And common humanity, so there's two parts. It's the belief that I and everyone else is fundamentally the same. At the human level, we all want to be well and to not be in pain and suffering, right? So regardless of who that is, fundamentally at the human level, you know, we all have different circumstances, different levels of privilege, vulnerability, but at the fundamental human level, we're all the same in this regard. We all want to be well and free of suffering. The other part of common humanity is that we're all interconnected, inextricably interconnected and interdependent. And so that means that I cannot be fully authentically myself until you can be fully authentically yourself. I cannot be fully free until you are fully free. So that part is also really important because it's really, we can do a kind of like bypassing, spiritual bypassing, if we just focus on the we're all the same, you know, part. We're also interdependent and interconnected. So your happiness and well-being is important for my happiness and well-being as well. Okay, so when we train ourselves in compassion for others, particularly as we're broadening the circle of compassion, it doesn't mean that we're agreeing with people or condoning their actions, right? Particularly when we think of people we find challenging, right? And today's kind of polarized world and the people that you all interact with every day, I'm sure there are many that you know, find challenging, that you don't agree with. But so we're not condoning their actions, but we're just not dehumanizing them. I can disagree with you. I can actually protest what you're doing, but I don't dehumanize you. And I can still connect with you as a fellow human being who also is just trying to be well, no matter what that looks like, trying to be well and free from suffering. And so we're both human beings, and we're interconnected, right? We're all part of the family. I can't kind of just dismiss you. So it's a very different relationship to being with people. And so compassion is, you can think of it as a way of accompanying suffering, accompanying discomfort. Suffering doesn't need to be big suffering. It can be little suffering, like discomfort, dis-ease, anything that where you're not just kind of feeling well, right? Accompanying those moments with kind of a sense of caring for yourself, for the other person, with resilience, right? Because we're in that kind of resilience zone, rather than getting caught up in overwhelm, stuck in frustration, which is all fine, but we can come back. We can come back to the regulated resilience zone. So that's just a little bit about compassion practice and training. So let's try it out. Right. So this is a very brief practice, and we're going to start easy. Right. So I'm going to invite you just to think of someone in your life that it's easy for you to feel a sense of caring toward. Right. So we're going to start with an easy object. And I invite you to choose someone who's not kind of going through a big suffering right now, right? Who's like relatively well, right? So it's easier to practice with. And there's no perfect person, so just whoever you pick is totally fine for this practice. Okay, so okay, once you have that person in mind, I'm going to invite you just to find your comfortable posture again. And just put a pretty image on the screen so you can, if you have your eyes open. Okay, so again, just starting to turn the attention inward into the body. And spending just a few moments just to settle the mind again by resting the attention on your anchor of the breath or body. So feeling this body supported by the chair, the earth below. Nothing to do, nowhere else to go in this moment. Just resting the attention in the body. Or you might stay with the breath. Just feeling the sensation of breathing in and breathing out. Nothing to fix, just noticing. Now I invite you to bring to mind this person that you've chosen for this practice. And imagine them standing in front of you or sitting just in front of you, noticing how you feel in their presence. Now I invite you to consider that this person has had highs and lows in life, just like you. They want to be free from pain and suffering, just like you. Just like you, they want to be loved, respected, and feel a sense of belonging. Now I invite you to silently offer them these phrases and adjusting the language if you'd like. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from fear and anxiety. May you know peace and joy. May you feel loved and accepted. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from fear and anxiety. May you know peace and joy. May you feel loved and accepted. Imagine that these wishes travel from your heart to theirs. And your wishes are received. Now, just letting go of any imagery. And allowing the mind to rest again on the breath or body for a few moments. Noticing how you feel. As you come to the end of the practice, just taking your time to slowly open the eyes, move the body. I'd like to move. And continuing to notice how you feel. Any shifts that might have happened or not. Okay, so that was a very, very brief practice, one of countless compassion practices. And I want to also share a practice that you can do on the spot, right? So we have these kind of more formal practices like the mindful awareness practice we did earlier and this one. And then we also have kind of on the spot practices that you can do in a few seconds, a minute, or a few minutes. Right? And this is called Just Like Me. And this is a practice that you can do. It's a really great one to do before or after interacting with someone you find challenging, to come from a place of compassion rather than something else. It's also good to do if you find yourself ruminating about someone that you find difficult and you just want to like quickly shift that mindset. So there are 3 steps, and the first step is, as always, to acknowledge reality as it is right now. So acknowledge this moment of discomfort or suffering for you, and give it a label, right? The emotion that you're feeling. And putting a label on the emotion activates the prefrontal cortex. So it brings that higher cognitive functioning back online if you're kind of getting caught up and your threat response is what's dominant. So it can just be a really simple label and just feeling, okay, I'm feeling anger, sadness, whatever it is. And then a brief reflection, just like me, this person also experiences the ups and downs of life and wants to be, well, wants to be heard, dislikes bureaucracy. They're giving me a hard time about bureaucracy, but actually they also dislike bureaucracy. It's just like me. And then extend a wish. It can just be one phrase, like, may you be well. May you feel at ease. May you feel heard. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a big thing, like you have to feel all these things. Just be like simple gesture of offering the wish. Okay, so stop share now. All right, so I'm gonna invite us back into breakout rooms. And I'm gonna invite you to just notice, what did you notice during the practice? And or when might this kind of compassion orientation be helpful for you at work? You don't have to like give specific names if you don't want, but just when might, just practically speaking, these kinds of practices or this kind of mindset be helpful at work? So you'll have about 8 minutes again. And so over to you, Alexandra. So we'll be in groups of 4. There might be a group of 3. Great. Welcome back. So I don't want to end right on the hour. I want to give you some time to kind of, for yourself before you move on to the next thing at the top of the hour. But I'd love to just hear from whoever would like to share about, what came up? How might this be compassion, be useful, helpful at work? Anything about the practice or any questions?
I'd just like to recognize Maria Cruz for a fascinating thing you said right at the end of our little session about separating out the human. Would you share that more widely?
Certainly. Maybe give it context. There's people that don't share our values. For example, most of us agree that there's this issue of climate change. Well, there are people out there who don't believe it, and many other things that are values that are essential for us, and we just cannot believe that other people think differently. So if you encounter one of these people, you tend to hate them or confront or have a passionate discussion. But maybe, you should look at that person as a person just like you, a parent, a father or mother, takes the kids to school, goes shopping, goes home, tries to have a normal life and defends the values that they have also, and is a nice person. You can actually be friends until you get into that conversation of climate change. So kind of taking out the content of of your enemy, why you become an enemy with somebody or confront, and try to make them essentially a human being like yourself in the everyday life. I don't know if that sums up the idea, Simon. Maybe you can add.
No, that's great. I just love to hear it again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe if I can add something to what Maya said, is that really in my experience, the space you provide for this kind of people, the kind of, if you're able to build trust and empathy and respect, they will be much more open to eventually listen what you have to say. I think that's really important, and I have had a really interesting experience. I think we need to be able to really be convinced of that, the importance of building the relationship. Many of these people, they close themselves, they resist because they don't feel accepted, so they're already in a defensive mode. But I have experience where that kind of person, if you are well received, etc., they can really open to new information and listen to what you can say.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Even just thinking like from our own perspective, if someone's like coming at us and telling us that, you know, like telling me I'm wrong, and, you know, I'm probably less likely to listen than if they kind of see me as a human first and connect as a human first, exactly like you're saying. Yeah. Anyone else?
And I wanted to share the fact, yeah, I find this practice super helpful in work situations, in many work situations. But for example, the one that Cruz explained, of course, which happened at work as well, with stakeholders in the field. But the thing I'm struggling with is remembering to practice that, you know, because you tend to go on an autopilot, as you said, you know, especially when you are in a stressful situation or you're feeling overwhelmed, then, you know, this is not the first thing that comes to your mind, to stop, slow down, and actually, you know, remembers that the person in front of you is human like you, and you know, wants to be well and free from suffering. So that's the issue, and that's the change of mindset and autopiloting in myself that I'm struggling with here.
Yeah, thank you, Pascal. I mean, that's just so human, and it's also why we do the practices when we're not activated, so that we can kind of ingrain it in our neurophysiology, and it becomes more habitual, so that when we are activated, we might not catch ourselves right at the beginning, but at some point, you know, we'll become more aware. And every time we kind of do that shift, we're creating the new neural pathways, reinforcing new habits, de-enforcing old habits. And then even if you catch yourself in the middle of a sentence, like every moment is the opportunity to start again. So you might just say, you know what, I'm going to pause. Can we come back to the conversation later? Life is messy. It's not going to be clean, right? We're all human. So at any moment we can pause, right? And but yeah, it is really hard in that moment when we are most likely to go into our habit, which is why we want to kind of equip ourselves when we're in that resilience zone, we're feeling safe, to, you know, like you go to the gym so that you're fit, so that you can live your life more healthily, right? So it's easier to walk up the stairs, it's easier to carry the grocery bags, you know, so it's like going to the gym, just, which is why kind of like making these practices routine is helpful. And I know Tupten talked about this, but, you know, like less and more frequently is better than kind of large doses infrequently. It's more likely to become a habit. So you might just do like 3 minutes in the morning every day. And we always encourage people to kind of tie the meditation practice to something you do routinely, right? So maybe I make a cup of tea in the morning and then I sit. That's my cue to sit. So every morning I usually, unless there's an emergency or something, I make a cup of tea, or after I brush my teeth. So just tying the activities together can be helpful, you know, or when you remember to do it. And then when we do mess up, which we will because we're human, to not kind of be hard on ourselves about it. But that's an opportunity to just notice, oh, okay, there's that habit again. you know, what can I do differently next time? Or maybe I'll like extend a, you know, like send an email or just, you know, connect with that person on the phone just to say like, hey, you know, let's try that conversation again. Or, you know, the less we're kind of tight and on autopilot, the more options there are to choose from. It's more liberating. We don't, yeah. Okay, so I want to respect your time and give you at least a few minutes before your next thing. But yeah, Toma, I don't know if there's anything you want to say. I'll just very quickly say thank you for showing up today and for your time. And yeah, feel free to reach out through Toma or Alexandra, anyone else on the team, anytime. Thank you for the work that you're doing, really, truly.
Thank you very much, Jane. It was great to spend this moment with you and get to be nourished by your work, what you propose, be nourished by also offering ourselves, you know, this time to reflect and nourish ourselves and connect. So we'll be in touch with you, Jane, soon as we are moving forward with this conscious sustainability initiative. Thank you very much for this webinar, and thank you all for attending. Have a great afternoon, morning, night, all around the world.
Thank you.